Good morning, everybody. A few weeks back, Mr. Dassey put out the message that he wanted people to contact him, particularly the ladies, the supporters, to contact him and do a Skype video with him, somewhat similar to what myself and Mark have been doing now for, I think my first one with Dassey would be sometime in November of last year. However, I went one step further and actually recruited quite a few people, much to Dassey's consternation, because he's a very busy guy. But of course, he has indeed had videos with Lisa and Rebecca, which is great. But as I say, I'm his recruitment guy. I've got one or two lined up for him. Hopefully, when back from holiday, the lovely Georgina from Holland, or let's use the proper term, Netherlands, which is somewhat near to Denmark, but certainly isn't Denmark. And they speak Dutch in Holland, except that Georgina's English is very, very good. So I'm quite looking forward, well, particularly looking forward to that. And he's told me about one or two other people that he's got lined up to do a Skype chat with him. So lots and lots of things to look forward to. One person that I got in touch with and mentioned about doing a Skype is Ali Apperson, who of course has already done a lot of videos on the subject of Stephen Brendan. And she said that one of the things that she would like would be for Dassey to lay out a scenario from start to finish that explains everything. And of course, that's impossible at the moment, because we still need further testing to be done on everything that Kathleen Zellner wants to test. And of course, the state are dragging their heels as much as possible in they've only sent over, I think so far, 9 items, which have come back to prove that the bullet certainly didn't go through anybody. It simply was fired into a piece of wood. As I say, it's impossible without further testing. What we can do, though, is we can come up with a list of theories. One of the best things to do is to come up with a theory and then attempt to debunk that particular theory. So although all of these theories are possible, I think most of them have been debunked. Let's just run through them, shall we? First and foremost, we've got the two that are convicted of the crime at the moment, Stephen Brendan. Is it possible that they did it? No. But we'll come back to that later. Next on my list, I've put Bobby Dassey and Scott Taddick. I suspect that at some point in the future, they might come to regret the fact that they alibied one another, because it places the pair of them at the same place at the same time on Highway 147. And obviously, where was Teresa's car found? On a roundabout on Highway 147. I think they might live to regret that particular one. And of course, one of the most striking bits of interview with Steve is when they ask Steve about what happened when Teresa left, and Steve says, well, she gave him the magazine. She was in the car, she gave him the magazine, he'd already paid her. Cheerio, off you go. Saw her drive off, went back into his trailer to put the magazine down, and we know he put the magazine down because we've got photographs of that. And we're then told that when he came out, he was going to go and see Bobby, but Bobby's car had gone. And that is, of course, a very, very, very significant piece of information that was left in Making a Murderer. Next, we've got, obviously statistically, Ryan is statistically the most likely. I think it's close on 100% amongst the white community. It's a murder by somebody who is close to the victim. My problem with that would be where did this occur? At the moment we seem to be drifting towards something happening on Highway 147. Okay, next, one of my favourites, Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department. We've only got to listen to Sheriff Ken Peterson say that it would be easier to kill Steve than to frame him, to know and to realise that that kind of conversation takes place, that they do in fact discuss assassinating people. Very, very interesting. Whether or not, though, Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department are that sophisticated to have done it all themselves, I suspect not. But maybe with the help of the state, and of course Peg Lautenschlager had huge incentive to frame Steve, because she knew that if Steve was successful in his civil suit, the floodgates would indeed be truly opened. Another theory we have to think about, of course, is that she could have been abducted by one of Lieutenant Kucharski's aliens. Anything's possible, according to Lieutenant Kucharski. Then there's Brendan's premonition. Pete Dassey says that Brendan had a dream where this hooded figure revealed themselves. And it's certainly one of the possibilities that has been steadily growing, certainly with me. We have zero evidence that the bones were Teresa. Now, I don't know if any of you have watched the film Snatch. There's a particularly good scene in it where Bricktop asks, "Do you know what nemesis means?" He then goes on to explain. And, if Steve had done this, maybe Steve should have listened to this bit of the film. He says, the best way to get rid of a body is to chop it into a dozen or so pieces and then feed it to pigs. They will go through flesh and bone in next to no time. But you need to remove the teeth, because the teeth will survive. And the teeth will survive fire. And how many teeth did we find? We found a little fragment of a tooth. Not enough, certainly, to identify the body as being Teresa's. We have absolutely no evidence that that was Teresa. The death certificate is a complete and utter fabrication. We also, I was watching one of Eric Hosey's older videos talking about the lies of Ken Kratz, about a bloodstain in the back of the RAV4 that Ken Kratz claimed was Stephen's, and yet this item, I think it was called A23, it came back as unidentifiable, neither Steve's nor Teresa's. So that also is very interesting. Going back to the case against Stephen Brendan, either deliberately or otherwise, I suspect more deliberately, Wiegert and Fassbender use total tunnel vision, just like Manitowoc did in 1985. They only focus their attention on Stephen. And we're told that as soon as the car is found, the question comes, is Stephen Avery in custody yet? For me, well, actually, I'm going to tell you a little aside here. Yesterday, I had cause to sort of reapply to join the Facebook support group. And when you do that, or when you join for the first time, you are given 3 questions that you have to answer. Number 1, do you believe that Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey are completely innocent, and why? Now, obviously, I put yes, and then there was only something like 250 letters that you could use. So, you know, try and explain why in such a short space. I've always maintained that the disappearance of Teresa Hellbuck is far too convenient for Manitou Sheriff's Department, in particular Dennis Vogel, Tom Kusurek and the state of Wisconsin, to be merely a coincidence. There are far too many coincidences in this. The second question was to do with, do you agree to stick to the rules? And as far as I know, I've generally stuck to the rules, get on fine with all of the admins, apart from maybe that Ericosi fella. I'm only joking. Then the third question was, how did you come across the Facebook support group? Now this is the funny thing, because I thought about it, and at first I thought, well, it was just by sheer accident. But then, of course, I realised that in my very, very first conversation with Sheriff Herman, Robert Herman, he actually mentioned the Facebook support group. It was actually Robert Herman, thank you, Robert, that directed me to the support group. And at the end of the conversation, I said to Robert that if Steve had done it, then long before Making a Murderer had come out, would he not have tried to help Brendan? Would he not have said, look, I admit I did it, and help Brendan in his cause to be free by saying Brendan had nothing to do with it? There's only one problem. If he did it, he would have to explain how he did it. And even Sheriff Herman admitted that that would indeed be a very interesting explanation, because there could be no possible explanation as to how Steve and Brendan did it, because they simply didn't do it.